The Casey Anthony case is one of the most high-profile and controversial criminal trials in recent American history. The case revolved around the disappearance and subsequent death of 2-year-old Caylee Anthony in Orlando, Florida, in 2008. Casey Anthony, Caylee's mother, was charged with first-degree murder and faced a highly publicized trial that lasted from May to July 2011. This report provides an in-depth analysis of the key facts and events surrounding the Casey Anthony case. Casey Anthony was born on the 19th of March, 1986 in Warren, Ohio, the USA, to parents George and Cindy Anthony. She was raised alongside her brother Lee. Her father worked in law enforcement. Anthony was a bright, personable young girl with friends and what many thought was an ordinary American family. However, friends say that a pattern of lying began when Anthony was in high school. Cindy and George attended Anthony's graduation, along with Anthony's grandparents, only to discover that she was several credits short of graduating. Anthony had stopped attending classes toward the end of the school year, but led her family to believe she would walk with the graduating class. When she was 19, Casey gave her family yet another shock. She had put on weight, and her parents suspected she was pregnant. But Casey denied it, claiming she was a virgin. Months into her pregnancy, she told her parents the truth. The identity of the baby's father, however, remained a mystery. Casey pointed to different men, including her fiancé, Jesse Grund, as well as a young man she had dated previously who had died in a car crash. And on August 9, 2005, Caylee Anthony was born. A friend of Casey's said that she had discussed giving the baby up for adoption, but she was discouraged by her mother. For the next few years, Casey and Caylee lived with her parents, and Grund acted as the baby's father.
Caylee was a really easy baby, I gotta be honest. So wonderful. I fell in love with her as soon as I saw her.
Grund even believed Caylee might be his baby, despite knowing that the timing of her conception made it improbable. A DNA test later found that Grund was not Caylee's father, and the identity of Caylee's father remained unknown. In mid-June 2008, Casey's mother Cindy questioned Casey's suitability and her being a mother. Casey would leave her parents' home after a major argument. Over the weeks, Cindy called her daughter to check on Caylee. Each time, Casey told her that Caylee was out on a play date with a babysitter, Zenaida Zanny Fernandez Gonzalez. On July 13, 2008, Cindy and George received a letter saying that Casey's car was in a tow yard. George went to pick the car up. He found Casey's purse along with Caylee's car seat and toys. George noticed a strong smell like that of a decomposing body coming from the trunk. Alarmed, Cindy, after not seeing or hearing from her granddaughter in almost a month, found Casey at the home of her boyfriend, Tony Lazaro, and brought her home. Cindy asked Casey, "Where's Caylee?" Casey broke down, telling her mother and brother Lee that she had been missing for 31 days, and she didn't report it or told anyone. She said Caylee is with the nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, in Orlando, and that Gonzalez had kidnapped Caylee. When the trunk was opened, it contained only a bag of trash. That day, Cindy reported Caylee missing, telling 911 dispatchers that Casey's car smelled of dead bodies and that she had not seen Caylee for 31 days.
911, what's your emergency? I called a little bit ago, the deputy sheriff saying I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing.
Okay, what is
here now?
Okay, what is the address that you're calling from?
We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her.
Your daughter admitted that the baby is where?
But the babysitter took her a month ago that my daughter's been looking for. I told you my daughter was missing for a month. I just found her today, but I can't find my granddaughter. And she just admitted to me that she's been trying to find her herself. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car.
Okay, what is the 3-year-old's name?
Caylee, Caylee, Anthony.
Caylee Anthony?
Yes.
Okay, is she white, black, or Hispanic?
She's white.
How long has she been missing for?
I have not seen her since the 7th of June.
What is her date of birth?
8/9/2000. Oh God, she's 3. She's 2005. George Caylee missing. Caylee's missing. Casey says Danny took her a month ago. She's been missing for a month.
Okay, I understand. Can you calm down for me for just a minute and I need to know what's going on, okay? I'm gonna try and talk.
What is it we can do?
Is your daughter there?
I'm on the phone with them.
Is your daughter there?
Yes.
Can I speak with her? Do you mind if I speak with her? Thank you.
I called them 2 hours ago. They haven't gotten here. Can you see? Finally admitted to Danny took her a month ago. It's trying to find her.
Ma'am. Ma'am.
Okay, Danny's here. They want to talk to you. Answer the question. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. Well, can you tell me what's going on a little bit?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me a little bit what's going on?
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
And you know who has her?
I know who has her. I've tried to contact her. I actually received a phone call today, now from a number that is no longer in service. I did get to speak to my daughter for about a minute.
Okay, did you guys call and report a vehicle stolen?
Yes, my mom did.
Okay, so there's been a vehicle stolen too?
No, this was my vehicle.
What vehicle was stolen?
It's a 98 Pontiac Sunfire.
Okay, I have deputies on the way to you right now for that. But now your 3-year-old daughter is missing. Caylee Anthony.
Yes.
White female.
Anthony. Yes, white female.
3 years old. 8/9/2005 her date of birth.
Yes.
And you last saw her a month ago?
31 days. It's been 31 days.
Who has her? Do you have a name?
Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
Who is that? Babysitter?
She's been my nanny for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years.
Why are you calling now? Why didn't you call 31 days ago?
I've been looking for her and have gone through other resources to try to find her, which was stupid.
Okay. Can you give me the name of the nanny again? Like spell it out for me?
Zenaida, Zenaida.
Last name?
Fernandez. Gonzalez. I think the officers are here.
The officers are there?
Yes.
Okay, hold on a second. Don't hang up with me yet. I need you... Okay.
After questioning Casey, detectives found discrepancies in a signed statement she made about Caylee's disappearance. Casey's friends and family had never heard of Gonzalez. Casey told investigators that she had left Anthony at the apartment of her nanny, Fernandez Gonzalez, and that Fernandez Gonzalez had kidnapped the toddler. But when police investigated the apartment, they found it had been abandoned for more than 140 days. Casey also told police that she was working at Universal Studios. But when investigators took her to Universal Studios on July 16th and asked her to show them her office, Casey led detectives into the building before admitting that she no longer worked there.
She turns left, starts walking down this hallway, and about halfway down the hallway, she stops, turns, looks at us, and says, "I don't work here."
As it turned out, she had not worked there since her maternity leave almost 3 years earlier. After admitting to not working at Universal Studios, Casey was arrested and charged with giving false statements to law enforcement and child neglect.
Not yet.
As the search for Caylee intensified, meanwhile, investigators looked into the odor that was in the trunk of Casey's car. Investigators stated that the presence of a decomposing human body is the only plausible explanation for the odor in Casey Anthony's trunk, and the results found in forensic testing. Testing was conducted on carpet samples from the trunk of the Pontiac Sunfire, along with a spare tire cover, scrapings from the wheel well, air samples, and paper towels found in a trash bag that had been in the trunk. Arpad Vass, a senior research scientist at Tennessee's Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Arpad Vass, stated their general research identified some 30 compounds as significant in the human decomposition process. 7 of those were confirmed in Anthony's trunk, he said. I can find no other plausible explanation other than that to explain all the results we found, Vass said. Casey came under increasing scrutiny for her actions in the days before Caylee was reported missing, including partying and, in early July, getting a tattoo that reads Bella Vita, or Beautiful Life in Italian. Meanwhile, Casey is still in prison. Detectives later discovered that, in fact, there was no nanny, and the search like no other in the history of missing child searches was taking place. On 2 separate occasions in the summer and fall of 2008, for a total of roughly 3 weeks, 1,500 to 1,800 people descended on Orlando to search for 2-year-old Caylee Anthony.
Thousands of volunteers who flooded Central Florida late last summer, on foot, on horseback, by boat, all looking for Caylee.
In August of 2008, a local meter reader named Roy Kronk and 2 colleagues were walking along this section of Suburban Drive when he decided to go into the woods and relieve himself. While he was standing in the forest, he noticed a small white object that looked like a skull. The next day, he called the police and met a deputy at the scene. However, they were unable to find the object, and the officer reportedly scolded him for wasting his time. On December 11, 2008, Roy was working in the area again when he decided to reinvestigate the site. This time he was able to locate the object and confirm that it was a human skull. The skull had duct tape on it. At that point, he called the police again, and a search team arrived at the scene. After combing through the woods, they discovered the remains of a young child in a trash bag. A few days later, they widened their search and found more bones. On December 19th, the medical examiner's office confirmed that the remains belonged to Caylee Anthony, who had been missing for nearly 6 months. The site in question was just a short 5-minute walk away from the Anthony residence on Hope Spring Drive. Casey was already charged with first-degree murder in October, and now with Caylee's skeletal remains found a year later in a wooded area near the Anthony family's house, was not a good look at all.
I'm a meter reader with Orange County, and I had the route today that included the Anthony's home. Okay, and I went down to the school and came back, and when I was coming back, I stopped between the 2 swamp areas there. If you're heading back out towards the main road on the left-hand side, in an area, I noticed something that looked white, and there was like a gray bag down in there. I don't know what it is. I'm not telling you it's Caylee or anything of that nature.
George Anthony, grandfather of Caylee Anthony, would have taken his own life had authorities not located him as quickly as they did. Police discovered a 5-page suicide note in the hotel that Anthony had apparently penned. In a somber 911 call, Conway reported George missing Thursday night and said George has taken several bottles of medication from the house as well as some pictures. One of the pictures was of little Caylee.
You learned in December of 2008 that the remains of your granddaughter were found. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What effect did that have on you when you learned that Caylee's remains had been found?
A deep hurt inside tears, the whole gamut of just an emotional loss, a breakdown inside of me, and seeing what my wife and my son went through.
Up to that moment, had you held out the hope that Caylee would be found alive?
Absolutely. Every day from July 15th until the day we were told it was Caylee.
In January of 2009, you went, I'll give you a moment.
Need a break, Mr. Anthony?
No, sir, I need to get through this. I need to have something inside of me get through this.
Do you need a break, Mr. Anthony?
No, sir, I'm fine.
In January, just let me know when you're okay.
I'm okay, sir.
On January 22nd of 2009, Mr. Anthony, you went and got a gun, didn't you?
Yes.
My understanding of the events of this date are that Mr. Anthony went and got a gun, that he did so with the purpose, I believe he will testify, he did so with the purpose of forcing people who he believed might know something about who killed Caylee, specifically friends or boyfriends of the defendant, with the intention of forcing them to reveal what they knew and then taking his own life. It is revealed in the suicide note, and I believe he will testify that that's what happened. The defense has brought up the suicide. I do, so the court knows, intend for him to identify his suicide note, and in my case, I do intend to offer it because it shows that on January 22nd of 2009, this man had no idea who killed Caylee Marie Anthony. And it rebuts implications by the defense that he did. It's directly contradictory to the defense's argument, and it is proof. And I do have case law when we try to admit the note, but at this point, the circumstances of the suicide were raised by defense counsel when he asked the question about that event, and I believe I'm entitled to go into it.
George's daughter, 22-year-old Casey Anthony, was charged with Caylee's murder in October before the toddler's decomposed body was found less than a mile from the Anthony family home. On April 13, 2009, prosecutors announced that they planned to seek the death penalty in the case. The trial of Anthony began in June 2011, 3 years after the disappearance of her daughter, Caylee. Cable news channels broadcast the trial live, and Anthony, Caylee, and the rest of the family dominated the news. The lead prosecutor in the case was Assistant State Attorney Linda Drain Burdick. Assistant State Attorneys Frank George and Jeff Ashton completed the prosecution team. Lead counsel for the defense was Jose Baez, a Florida criminal defense attorney. The trial began at the Orange County Courthouse with Judge Belvin Perry presiding. In the opening statements, lead prosecutor Linda Drain Burdick described the story of the Anthony's disappearance day by day. The prosecution painted a picture of Casey as a promiscuous party girl, unconcerned with her missing daughter and responsible for her murder. A website about the toxic chemical chloroform had been searched on the Anthony's home computer, a search that Cindy took responsibility for on the stand, and chloroform was found in the trunk of Anthony's car.
Told you during my deposition in 2009 that I made those searches. You told me at your deposition that you searched for chlorophyll, correct?
Yes.
And you spelled chlorophyll for me. Do you
Yes.
recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall denying that you made any searches for how to make chloroform?
I didn't look up how to make chloroform. I looked up chloroform.
You spelled chlorophyll wrong.
Correct.
Searched for self-defense.
Yes, I did not search for self-defense.
Household weapons.
I did not search for household weapons.
Neck breaking.
I did not search for neck breaking, but I do recall that there was a pop-up
that was showing a YouTube regarding a skateboarder that was skateboarding on rails, like if you're going, like a turnstile type rail, if you're going into some place and the skateboarder. And I recall it saying a neck-breaking feat.
Anthony's defense, led by Jose Baez, with co-attorney Cheney Mason working pro bono, told a very different story. According to the defense, Caylee had drowned in the family's pool on June 16, 2008, and George Anthony had covered up the death so that Casey wouldn't be charged with child neglect. Baez shocked the courtroom when he said during his opening statements that George had in fact sexually abused Casey.
You're going to hear all kinds of bizarre family behavior that just doesn't make sense. How parents should stand by their child, but instead are throwing them under the bus, making bizarre statements and accusations. And that's what this case is going to be about. You're going to hear all kinds of interesting behavior from all parties, not just Casey. And once you see some of this behavior, you'll realize that the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. We are what we are because of who brought us into this world and how we were raised. Casey was raised to lie. This child, who at 8 years old, learned to lie immediately. She could be 13 years old, have her father's penis in her mouth, and then go to school and play with the other kids as if nothing ever happened. Nothing's wrong. That will help you understand why no one knew that her child was dead. That's the most important thing you must keep in the back of your mind, is that sex abuse does things to us. It changes you. Some people are fortunate to live with it. Others are not. And in this sad tragedy, it had to happen to Casey. On June 16th, 2008, Casey was home with Caylee, and so was her father. Early morning hours, the exact time is not known. It could have been early afternoon, early morning. Actually, it was the early morning hours. George Anthony approached Casey and started yelling at her. "Where's Caylee? Where's Caylee?" They began to search the house. They couldn't find her. This is a mock-up of the Anthony home, where you'll see they both came outside. Casey came around to the left of the house. George went that way towards the pool. They have an above-ground pool with a ladder. As soon as Casey came around this corner and went back, she saw George Anthony holding Caylee in his arms. She immediately grabbed Caylee and began to cry and cry and cry. And shortly thereafter, George began to yell at her. "Look what you've done! Your mother will never forgive you, and you will go to jail for child neglect for the rest of your freaking life." She cried and asked for her father's help. And it was shortly thereafter that George did help. It's at this moment that Casey should have been stronger. Casey should have called 911. Casey should have done the right thing. And that's what she's guilty of. She's not guilty of murder. This is not a murder case. This is not a manslaughter case. This is a sad, tragic accident that snowballed out of control. Her death was covered up.
And that her brother Lee had made sexual advances towards her as well. A paternity test showed that neither Lee nor George Anthony was Caylee's father. Anthony was used to covering up her hurt, Baez said. This is her excuse for countless lies she had told before. George denied the allegations. On June 30th, the defense rested. Anthony herself did not take the stand. In the trial's second week, the prosecution called various members of Casey's family to the stand. George was their first witness, and in a response to their questioning, he denied having sexually abused his daughter. Both George and Casey's then boyfriend testified they did not smell anything resembling human decomposition in Casey's car when she visited them while Anthony was missing, but George said he did smell something similar to human decomposition when he went to pick up the car on July 15th. Cindy testified that her comment to 911 that Casey's car smelled like someone died was just a figure of speech, further noting that she had made exaggerated claims on the phone in an effort to get the police to respond quickly. But the prosecution continued to present testimony against Casey Anthony. They stayed focused on Casey's car as the jury heard George Anthony describe the smell of decomposition in the car as he drove it home from impound. It had been found abandoned in a parking lot and towed 2 weeks earlier. The towing company's manager also testified to the smell, saying it was detectable even with the car closed, but far stronger when the doors and trunk were opened. The decomposition of a human body is a very unique and recognizable smell to anyone with experience with it, and the manager testified that he has had that experience.
You said that Johnson's tower had received a 98 Pontiac Sunfire on June 30th of 2008. Did you have contact with it on that day?
No, ma'am.
How long was the vehicle on the property at Johnson's Wrecker?
I don't recall the exact length of time. If I remember rightly, it was around about 2 weeks. We had quite a high turnover of vehicles in and vehicles out, so it didn't behoove me to pay a lot of attention to a vehicle unless it sat for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't be specific, but round about the fourth or fifth day that we'd had the vehicle, I went up to it and gave it a cursory external inspection to determine what condition it was in.
Do you recall at the time you made this cursory evaluation of the vehicle, after it had been there for 3 or 4 days, whether or not you noticed any odor emanating or coming from the vehicle in any way?
As I was looking around the vehicle, there was nothing really noticeable at all until I put my hand up against the glass to shield the sun and look through the windows, and at that point I did notice a fairly strong odor.
How long total have you been in the towing business?
With exception of a 2-year hiatus in the mid-90s, it's been almost 30 years.
Have you ever had the opportunity in your 30 years as in the towing business to come across a vehicle in which there had been a dead body?
Yes, ma'am.
Having had that varied experience, can you distinguish between the scent of trash or garbage and the scent of decomposing human remains?
Overruled.
In my opinion and my experience, the smell of decomposition is unique in comparison to the smell of rotten food or rotten garbage or anything else. It's a very, very unique, distinctive smell.
When you smell that, do you, in your opinion, know the difference?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that when you did your cursory inspection and put your hands up to the glass to shield the sun, you noticed an odor.
Yes, ma'am.
At that point. Were you able at that juncture to make any connection as to whether or not that was garbage or something else?
It was an odor consistent to what I'd smelled in the past when it comes to decomposition. The car is fairly well sealed, so without being able to enter the vehicle, the strength of it was a little minimal, but it was still there. The instant flash in my mind was, I know what that smells like. But looking in the vehicle, noticed nothing to trigger anything. And at this point, it's just a car in the yard.
Okay.
George Anthony also claims familiarity with the stench through his time as a detective. The prosecution began addressing Casey's motive by attempting to present text messages they say show Casey's true feelings about her daughter, that Caylee stood in the way of her desire for a party-filled lifestyle, and her relationship with her boyfriend Lazaro. Judge Belvin Perry questioned the probative nature of these messages and suggested they would be excessively prejudicial, so the prosecution withdrew their attempted introduction of them, the testimony of Cindy Anthony, Casey's mother. It was Cindy who finally reported Caylee missing a month after she last saw her, and her testimony focused on that month. Cindy described her repeated attempts to see her granddaughter and her daughter's varied explanations for the child's absence. The explanations involved a nanny named Zanny who was taking care of Caylee, while Anthony attended work meetings, as well as a car accident during an outing in Tampa. Another explanation was that they were staying in a hotel with a wealthy suitor. These stories conflict with previous testimony, and Anthony's lawyers have suggested Anthony's lies during this period were due to a habit of hiding her pain based on a history of abuse. Testimony included a description of a statement and interview given by Casey after Caylee was reported missing, in which she claimed Caylee had been kidnapped by the nanny introduced to her by Hopkins, a friend of Casey, who later denied those claims of ever introducing her to a nanny.
You know Casey Anthony?
I do.
When did you first meet her?
Probably middle school.
Did you stay in touch from middle school up until 2008?
Through passing.
How would you characterize your relationship with Miss Anthony?
More or less acquaintances.
Okay. Weren't very good friends?
Not very good friends.
Did you ever work at Universal Studios?
I did.
When did you work at Universal Studios?
Approximately 2002.
Okay. How long did you work there for?
1 year.
Did you ever work there at the same time that Casey Anthony worked there?
I don't think so.
You don't recall ever seeing her there?
Never.
Did you ever introduce Casey Anthony to a woman by the name of Zenaida Gonzalez?
I did not.
Did you ever use Zenaida Gonzalez as a nanny?
No, sir.
Do you have any children?
No, sir.
Have you lived in the Orlando area consistently since 2002?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever lived in Jacksonville?
No, sir.
Have you ever lived in North Carolina?
No, sir.
Did you see Casey Anthony in the month of June of 2008?
No, sir.
July of 2008?
Yes, sir.
Where did you see her?
It was at the Waterford Lakes Ale House.
Do you recall what day that was?
It was the first Tuesday in that July 2008.
Okay. Does July 2nd ring a bell?
Yes, sir.
Did you go there with her?
No, sir.
Were you planning on seeing her there?
No, sir.
Did you speak with her?
Yes, sir.
What was the nature of the conversation?
Hi, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. Exchange numbers, and that was pretty much it.
Did you ever hear from her again after July 2nd of 2008?
I did, through text messages. They seemed to be mass text messages, I believe more than just myself got them, about going to a club called Fusion.
Did she ever tell you that Zenaida Gonzalez had taken her daughter?
No, sir.
Were you aware that she had a daughter?
Yes, sir.
Had you ever met her?
No, sir.
Is your name Jeffrey Michael Hopkins?
No, sir.
You have been contacted by law enforcement immediately when this case came to light, did you not?
That is correct.
And you let law enforcement know that you don't have a child named Zachary.
That is correct.
And that you are not rich from a trust fund.
That is correct.
And that you did not have a girlfriend named Zenaida Gonzalez.
Correct.
And that you never introduced Zenaida Gonzalez to Casey.
No, sir.
And that you and Casey were not going to, that your son Zachary, his mother died in I guess, an accident or some passed away quite early. You told them you didn't have any knowledge of that, right?
No, sir.
And you told them you weren't going to move in with Casey and Caylee and your son Zachary, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And you told them all of these stories were just one great fiction. Did you not?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And it's not you.
It is not me.
Okay. Now, do you have any information as to what happened to Caylee Anthony on June 16, 2008?
I do not.
You don't have any idea how she passed away?
I have no idea.
You were asked a question about Zenaida Gonzalez. Do you even know anyone named Zenaida Gonzalez?
No, sir.
The investigators were unable to find the nanny described by Anthony. Anthony claimed she did not come to the police after the kidnapping out of fear. The defense's claim that Caylee died in an accidental drowning clearly conflicts with this original statement. While earlier testimony focused on the signs of decomposition from a body in Casey Anthony's car, later testimony focused on the remains themselves. Caylee Anthony's skeleton was found on December 11, 2008, having decomposed in a field among garbage bags for up to 6 months. Duct tape was found over the mouth, holding the jawbone to the rest of the skull. The placement of the duct tape was key in the prosecution's case for foul play. Dr. Jan Garvalia testified that the way the body was left to rot indicated foul play, along with the duct tape and Anthony's failure to report her daughter's disappearance. A possible new lead for the prosecution turned up in the form of a woman who shared jail time with Casey Anthony. April Whalen had a toddler close in age to Caylee, who died in a drowning accident conspicuously similar to the one Anthony's defense has put forward as Caylee's cause of death, including the child being discovered by the grandfather. The prosecution explored if Whalen was a possible inspiration for Casey's story.
Last night, all off camera, Fox News contacted the parents of April Whalen at their Orlando area home, and they told us that April told them that back in 2009, when she was in the same cell block as Casey Anthony, that she did speak with Casey Anthony, but they never talked about her own personal tragedy, which was in 2007, her own son drowned in the swimming pool and was discovered by his grandfather. Well, they said that every single person in that cell block, every single female inmate, was very well aware of their story, regardless of whether April Whalen told Casey Anthony directly or not. Implication being Casey certainly could have heard of that story and concocted that alibi for herself. Whether the lead prosecutor, Linda Drain Burdick, brings any of these inmate testifying witnesses to the stand remains to be seen here, because the evidence doesn't seem as super strong as perhaps they may even feel that they even find necessary at this point.
After the prosecution finished presenting their case, the defense moved to acquit Casey Anthony on the grounds that the prosecution had not met the burden of proof. They claimed there was no evidence that Caylee Anthony was murdered or that there was premeditation. On July 3rd, the state and defense in the Casey Anthony trial gave closing statements, bringing together their arguments before the jury began deliberations. The state focused on Casey's many lies throughout the period her daughter was missing, then discussed the items found with the body, claiming they showed that a stranger could not have killed Caylee. They argued that the defense theory of the case that Caylee died in an accidental drowning covered up by her grandfather was illogical. The defense emphasized holes in the prosecution's case, claiming they did not explain how Caylee died and were trying to play up the lying and partying on Anthony's part to play on the jury's emotions and turn them against her. After 10 hours of deliberations, the jury in Casey Anthony's trial came back with a verdict, not guilty on all major charges. They found her guilty of the 4 counts of giving false information to law enforcement with which she was charged, but not guilty of the murder and child abuse counts.
In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, State of Florida versus Casey Marie Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 6. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict is to count 7. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson.
Many people were outraged by the verdict, believing that Casey had gotten away with murder. A crowd of 500 outside the courthouse reacted with anger, chanting their disapproval and waving protest signs.
Murder, verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Verdict to count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer. The jury find the defendant not guilty. Not guilty. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
Not guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. So say we all, dated at Orlando.
Not guilty. Not guilty.
This is like OJ all over again.
Absolutely shocked. They totally got it wrong.
I cannot believe the verdict today.
Not guilty, first-degree murder.
People took to Facebook and Twitter, as well as other social media outlets, to express their outrage. Traffic to news sites surged from about 2 million page views a minute to 3.3 million, with most of the visits coming from the United States. Mashable reported that between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., 1 million viewers were watching CNN.com/live, 30 times higher than the previous month's average. Twitter's trending topics in the United States were mostly about the subjects related to the case, and Newser reported that posts on Facebook were coming in too fast for all Facebook to even count them, meaning at least 10 per second. Some people referred to the verdict as OJ number 2, and various media personalities and celebrities expressed outrage. Casey left for an undisclosed location not long after the verdict. However, on August 12th, she was ordered to return to Florida to serve a year's supervised probation for an unrelated check fraud conviction. Casey returned to Florida on August 25th and served out her probation in an undisclosed location.
It really was an extraordinary and perhaps to many people infuriating scene early this morning. Let's bring up that video once again. At exactly 12:14 a.m., after 1,054 days in jail, Casey Anthony, who has been called the most hated woman in America, walked free. She didn't say a word, and neither did her lawyer. It was a cloak and dagger-like operation. There were armed guards, black SUVs, perhaps a secret car switch in a covered garage.
Huge crowds, and all of this to throw off the media and anyone who may want to do Casey harm. There is a real fear of retaliation here. She is now entirely free and no longer under any state protection. Our ABC affiliate in Orlando is reporting she boarded a private jet, and there's wild speculation about where that jet is headed. But as of now, no definitive answer, and ABC's Jim Avila is in Orlando and has been following the developments throughout the night. Quite a scene, Jim.
Good morning, Bianna. In fact, the Sheriff's Department wasted no time in showing Casey Anthony the door. She was eligible for release at 12:01. By 12:10, she was free. Her lead attorney telling ABC News she's heading for counseling, not plastic surgery. Casey Anthony's first taste of freedom in nearly 3 years, tinged with the unmistakable flavor of fear. A 12-second walk, $537 in her pocket, and her trusted attorney by her side. She walked with purpose from the blue doors of Orange County Jail through the fluorescent lights of the institution without comment, staring straight ahead, no stops, and only a whispered thank you to the sergeant of the heavily armed and bulletproof vested special response team that protected her as she emerged into another chaotic scene. A crowd of more than 100 behind plastic barricades came to watch, and for the most part, jeer her release.
I wanted her to experience something that's amazing, something that was not supposed to happen. Nothing like this has ever happened in Orlando, so we're here for the experience.
A reception she could not miss, even in the short walk to an idling SUV that sped off into the night, trailed by helicopters into downtown, where she switched vehicles at one of her attorney's offices and disappeared into the night. The local ABC station reporting she went to a private plane that took her to destinations unknown, leaving behind her childhood home and where she gave birth to Caylee, saw her die, and was acquitted of her murder.
Since the end of the trial, various movements have arisen for the creation of a new law called Caylee's Law that would impose stricter requirements on parents to notify law enforcement of the death or disappearance of a child. One such petition, circulated via change.org, has gained nearly 1.3 million electronic signatures. In response to this and other petitions, lawmakers in 4 states, Florida, Oklahoma, New York, and West Virginia, have begun drafting versions of Caylee's Law. The law in Oklahoma would require a child's parent or guardian to notify police of a missing child within 24 hours, and would also stipulate a time frame for notification of the disappearance of a young child under the age of 12. The Florida law would make it a felony if a parent or legal guardian fails to report a missing child in timely manner if they could have known the child would be in danger. On November 29, 2022, a docuseries was released on Peacock, directed by Alexandra Dean, titled Casey Anthony, Where the Truth Lies. In an interview with USA Today, Dean said that Casey's pathological lying was a defense mechanism caused by her experience of alleged sexual abuse, and that police never looked at her father as a suspect in the disappearance of Caylee. In the documentary, Casey alleges that her father staged Caylee's drowning in order to cover up that he may have been abusing his granddaughter. The Casey Anthony case continues to generate public interest and debate. Many remain divided over her guilt or innocence, and it serves as a cautionary tale about the role of media and public opinion in high-profile trials. The conclusion of Caylee Anthony's story is undoubtedly a profoundly sad one. Caylee's disappearance and subsequent death at the age of 2 are tragic events that have left a lasting impact on many people. The case evoked strong emotions and sparked intense debates about justice, parental responsibility, and the role of the media in high-profile trials. Caylee's death is a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the importance of protecting them. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance and the trial of her mother, Casey Anthony, expose the complexities of the legal system and the challenges in proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. While Casey Anthony was acquitted of the most serious charges related to Caylee's death, the case continues to serve as a somber reminder of the limitations of the legal process and the painful reality that justice is not always achieved in a manner that satisfies everyone involved. For those who followed the case closely, Caylee Anthony's tragic end is a reminder of the need for improved child protection measures, the importance of responsible parenting, and the impact of sensationalized media coverage on public perceptions of crime and justice. Ultimately, Caylee's story is a heartbreaking one, and her memory lives on as a symbol of innocence lost too soon.